Story of Oedipus the king and the axial age. And why is this story important? The story of a man who is the man with the worst luck in the history of humanity. And you're like, this is supposed to be an interesting and important story. And it is. So why is that? And Sophocles, Greek, Athenian, axial age, he was living in the 400s BCE, before the Common Era. And this was coming out of the ancient times, the Bronze Age, the beginning of the Iron Age, and what we're calling the Axial Age, this turn, this axis, this huge change, basically the development of philosophy, of deeper religious thought, of deeper ethical thought. And it's instantiated largely in things like Sophocles' plays, like Oedipus the King and Oedipus at Colonus, as well as in Sophocles, Socrates and Aristotle and Plato. Like the philosophers themselves are going to do like philosophy proper, but it's already happening here in this play. And he's roughly, I think he's pretty much the same time as Socrates, the Peloponnesian Wars. And this is like in China, like in North India, like in other parts of the world, these axial ages tended to happen, at least as far as I can tell, when there was disorder, when there was a kind of collapse of a big polity. And so there was more fluidity of thought and more openness to new ideas, and more intellectuals kind of like forced to develop new ideas. And so here's Sophocles. And so what's Oedipus? Oedipus is the story of a man who has the worst possible luck in history, because he is fated to kill his father and have sex with his mother and have children by her. And, you know, wow, that sucks. I mean, like, talk about really bad luck. And the more he tries to avoid this fate, the faster it comes and grabs him. So the more he chases this tail, the farther and farther away he gets from like catching it, if that's a good analogy. Anyway, and so this is markedly different than the traditional Greek hero or Anglo-Saxon or Chinese hero, who was strong, violent, aggressive, and able to win battles and able to be the alpha male, like Achilles or like Hector, who Hector gets killed by Achilles, but self-confident. The Iliad is about the wrath of Achilles, his anger. He's not contemplative for the most part. He's not self-reflective, whereas Oedipus is. He's forced into self-reflection because the enemy, the monster that he has to defeat, he's pursuing this monster, like Achilles pursuing his monster, or Beowulf pursuing his monster. But then as he gets closer to the monster, he realizes the monster is himself. So now what do I do? And so, or like the Epic of Gilgamesh, what's the goal of Gilgamesh? A life of glory, of fame. And how do you get fame? By, you don't gain immortality by, because you can't live forever, we're mortals, but you gain immortality by becoming famous, by winning some battles, by doing some famous things. And so that's like the old style of hero. But then this new axial age hero is way more complicated, way more self-reflective, often tragic, often forced to the limit of what a human can put up with. Um, like Moses at the burning bush. This is a new kind of hero where he sees this thing that he can't make sense of, like a bush that's burning, but it's not burning. Like, okay, it's like a self-contradiction. It's this thing that defies sense making. And sometimes we face the reality and it doesn't make sense. And we're in a meaning crisis. And Moses asks that being, what's your name? Give me your name. And God says, I am who am. I'm the ground of being. Anyway, so that's another story. That's another axial age story. But let's get back to Oedipus. Life at the limit case. And I'm going to compare this to stories like in a concentration camp where someone's in life at a limit case where the human is stripped of everything, all the kind of things that can make me feel valuable, like status, my family, my wealth, my power, my my place in the pecking order, stripped of all of that, stripped of clothes, stripped of names, stripped of, you don't even have a name in the concentration camp. And I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl or Primo Levi or Elie Wiesel. And these stories, which are horrific, but they're interesting to us because we see, in a way that's similar to Oedipus, a person who is stripped down to the barest bare humanity, like King Lear, looking at the bare human himself. And that forces this look at the inner life. And what's going to happen to Oedipus is he sees the world. It makes no sense. It's like this burning bush that it's contradictory. It's violent. It's threatening. It makes no sense. He can't comprehend it. So the best thing is to make himself blind, and he bashes out his eyes because he can't see. So better not to see what he can't make sense of. And okay, so this is this axial age. It's a revolutionary age. Like this huge change, this huge turn, this huge axis of change, like 50,000 years ago in the upper Paleolithic age. So there was these moments in human history where, because of a technological breakthrough or some circumstances in society or economics or farming, like these new things that happen completely changed the way humans experience the world. This is what's happening in the axial age. And I was in thinking about farming for a second before we get to the axial age. 11,000 years ago, I guess around 9,000 or 9,500 BCE, farming was developed and spread from the Middle East to Europe, and it was developed also in other parts of the world, in China and so forth. And I was in Jericho, which is in Israel today, and it's the oldest continuously inhabited city or town in the history of humanity. And it was just this amazing experience of being in this city. And it's just a kind of a regular city. It's not a specifically, it's kind of a poor city. It's got a lot of commerce. I mean, it's an agricultural city there near the Jordan River, in the Judean desert, close to the Dead Sea. And it was just kind of moving and like kind of walking amongst these camels and people and thinking about, like, this place has been inhabited. This is the place. I mean, it's not the first, as far as we know, city, but it's certainly one of the first, and it's the one that's been continuously inhabited, where farming was developed. And so like so much happened in that place. And okay, so that's the farming. But then thinking about that analogically, or like an analogy to the Axial Age, that in Athens and in Jerusalem or Bethel and in the Indus River Valley and in I'm not sure where in China, but in that kingdom of China, the Shang dynasty, or whatever it was, that or in Confucius, I guess he was, I'm not sure what state he was in, was the Lu, I think. Anyway, in those places, humanity made huge leaps forward in the development of our experience, of our thought, of our emotional lives, of our psychological lives, of ultimately religious life, philosophical lives. And so in Israel, Deutero Isaiah, so this is going later than Moses. Moses really was not the Axial Age. In fact, he was quite a bit earlier than the Axial Age. But Isaiah the prophet during the Babylonian exile, and then the books of wisdom and proverbs and archetypal stories and patterns and rituals and plays. And here's Oedipus, this play, which was really a ritual. Like these Greek plays were in the middle of a religious festival. And so the people are experiencing it in the middle of it's a ritual. It's bodies moving across the stage and an audience gathered around them, seeing a mythic story that tells them who they are and that makes them reflect on who they are as Greeks, as Athenians, with music. And so that's Oedipus. So let me go to my little drawing board and see if I can get this little chart and make just a couple of notes here. So if you think about, I mentioned these traditional heroes, you have Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh. Am I spelling that correctly? In the Middle East. And I mentioned Achilles, the Greek, and you can say Odysseus. But then here we have in this Axial Age, Oedipus. And Oedipus, who he sort of starts off like an Achilles or a Gilgamesh. He's heroic. He has defeated monsters. He's defeated the Sphinx. He's a hero. People love him. He becomes the king. So he is acting in that heroic mode, and he starts off just as a kind of regular hero, but then he crashes and burns because he's the least lucky person in the history of the world, because he's fated, and we could talk about that, like fate, what does that mean? But he's fated to kill his father and have sex with his mother, these things which basically strip you of your identity. Like then all of a sudden you're just like, what the hell just happened? Who the hell am I? What the, WTF? I'm not going to say it. And so you're stripped bare and you're forced to look at yourself and your world, and it makes no sense. And it is, what's the word? It's like you look at the world and it's like this, the world is a vampire. It's like this world that just like is destroying you. And so what does he do? He blinds himself. This is the appropriate thing to do. And he does it to himself. He doesn't let anyone else do it. Like, okay, I'm still me, and it's better if I blind myself. I can let the gods, I can let others. No, I'm going to blind myself. I at least have this agency. And so that, in a way, what does it make the world easier to get? I guess so. I mean, he makes himself completely vulnerable, and luckily he has a daughter who actually is also his sister, because it's the has the same mother. Um, and there's two of them. One's Antigone. There's another great kind of axial age play, Antigone, which is similar to Oedipus. Let's put Antigone on here for a second, because like Oedipus, the person is stuck in a double bind. Is that the right word? Double bind, in the sense that she wants to do the right thing, but is the right thing to serve her state or to serve her family? And like, you need to do philosophy here, because this is not, there's not, this is out of the rule book. This is not um the standard heroic fare of previous stories. So yeah, so that was my little overview. So let's get further into Oedipus the king. And at the beginning, Oedipus is irascible, self-confident, pious, and he's facing this plague that has afflicted Thebes, his city. He's the king of this city. He's married the queen because the queen was a widow. Conveniently, her husband has died. Turns out Oedipus killed him, didn't know it was him. And he's coming here at the beginning of the play that he might learn thereby what act or word by which I could save this city. Like, I'm the savior of the city. I'm the hero of the city. I'm going to do this. Let me figure this thing out. I can figure this out. And he's got this Homeric hero mode, um, looking for glory. He's ready to get glory. He's used to getting glory. And he comes to the seer, the blind seer, Tiresias. This is so rich, isn't it? The blind seer Tiresias. He calls him, he summons the seer. Okay, tell me who's the source of this plague. There's some kind of crime or bad thing that's happened in the city that's the source of this plague, and people are getting sick. We need to stop this plague. I'm the king. I got to stop this thing. And Tiresias says to him, alas, how terrible is wisdom when it brings no profit to the man that's wise. Isn't that awesome? So like, is that wisdom, when like the wisdom tells you like your whole world is effed up and like you've effed it up? And yeah, um, well, this is the type of life at the edge philosophy that Sophocles and that Oedipus are going to have to grapple with here, and we, the audience. And so as Oedipus starts to see the truth, and he's like getting closer, like this clue, I'm trying to figure out who was the source of the plague, um and then Tiresias says it plain, because Oedipus keeps asking him, like, tell me what you know. And Tiresias says, you are the land's pollution. And Oedipus is like, okay, the truth, the light, it's kind of blinding me. Like, okay, I can't make sense of this. This doesn't make sense. And he keeps asking, and he says, speak what? Tell me again, that I may learn it better, he says to Tiresias. So Tiresias is like, okay, you're asking me for the truth. Here it is. I say, you are the murderer of the king whose murderer you seek. And then Oedipus is like, okay, clearly you're lying. You're probably the murderer yourself. I'm going to come after you. So he can't figure out what to do with this. So he becomes aggressive. He becomes aggressive towards Tiresias. He becomes aggressive towards Creon, who brought Tiresias. He starts, it's like, I need to find who to convict here. So he starts convicting everybody except himself. And his wife / mother, Jocasta, like they're kind of figuring it out together, and she says like, well, the king was killed by robbers. When was he killed? Just before you arrived, actually. Oh, what a coincidence. Duh. And so they're talking further, and Oedipus says to her, well, what did the king Laius look like? He looked kind of like you. duh, like you're almost like, oh my gosh, can't you see what's going on here? Anyway, they don't, because he's blind. He sees and he's blind, and so he's pushing further and further, trying to grab the truth. She says he was in form not unlike you. Ha 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 ha. I mean, this is almost comedic how they can't figure out what's going on, and we're like watching this train wreck in slow motion. And Oedipus is starting to make sense of this, and as things progress, he says to the gods, he says, "What have you designed, O Zeus, to do with me?" And yet he keeps pressing to learn more and more. And there was like 5 men killed on the road. It's like, well, I happen to killed 5 men on the road too. And he says, what man on earth was so hated by the gods? So hated by the gods. So this is what Oedipus is figuring out. Like, the gods hate me. Like the world, the gods hate me. Like I'm the butt of a horrible joke. Life sucks, and that's the definition of my life. Like everything I do sucks. That's all I've got to face. This is kind of like a man in depression. Like nothing makes sense. Everything he thought made sense, all of a sudden it's flipped and it doesn't make any sense. And he's getting more and more information, and the messenger comes. Oh, I've got good news. You weren't those parents who you thought were your parents, they weren't your parents, actually. I brought you from another family. Oh, that's great news. Wait a minute. Is that great news? Because now he's getting closer and closer to the truth. And then Oedipus says, because he's talking to his wife, Jocasta, he thinks, oh, Jocasta kind of runs away because she's figuring this out quicker than he is. And Oedipus thinks, oh, she's just afraid that I'm low born. So like if they find out that I'm low born, like born of like poor parents, that she's going to be disgraced. That's not what it is, Oedipus. And so, but he says, still a little bit clueless, but I count myself a child of fortune, beneficent fortune, and shall not be dishonored. And he is a child of fortune, bad fortune, not beneficent fortune, a cruel, violent fortune or luck or chance. Like so what is the role of luck, chance, fortune in the human life? As we're free, but yet we have luck, or is this designed by the gods to like punish me because I did something wrong, or just because for the hell of it, like for no reason? It makes no sense. And that's what Oedipus is wrestling with. That's why this play is so good. And so as the messenger comes and they find the herdmen who had found Oedipus when he was a little baby, because they had let him out there to die, thinking like, let's just let this kid die. That's probably the best thing that can happen. His mother thought that, and his father. Again, trying to cheat fate, but the more you try to cheat fate, the more fate's going to come back and bite you, and that's what happens. And the messenger says to Oedipus, it was the child that this herdsman found. It was one of the children of King Laius, the king before you were a king. Well, who gave you the child? Was this like an illegitimate child? No, Jocasta gave me the child. This was your mother. I mean, your wife, or your mother, or your And so Oedipus, then it's getting closer and closer, and he says, "Oh, oh, oh! They will all come out clearly. Light of the sun, let me look upon you no more after today." So it's coming clearer, but he still needs to keep pushing to get the certainty of this. And so when he does, and then he finds out that his wife / mother has killed herself, he goes, and off stage, we don't see this. This is obscene off stage that we see the violence. He tears the brooches. Here's the description. other people describing what happened. He tore the brooches, the gold chased brooches fastening her robe, Jocasta's robe, away from her, and lifting them up high, dashed them on his own eyeballs, shrieking out such things as, "They will never see the crime I have committed or had done upon me." And so blinded, he blinds himself. And Oedipus comments, "It was Apollo, friends, Apollo that brought this bitterness, my sorrows to completion. But the hand that struck me was none but my own. I'm the one who did this. I have this much agency. I cannot bear to see this. I'm going to stop myself from seeing it." And he says, "Why should I see whose vision showed me nothing sweet to see? The world that I see sucks in the most extreme degree. I cannot bear to look upon it." Like Job, another Axial Age figure, we could say, who says it was better if I had never been born. And so Job, well, we'll talk about Job another time. He contemplates the total stripping bare of himself for no reason, and all of us is like, well, it must be because you did something wrong. No, I didn't do anything wrong. It's just for no reason. There's no meaning. This is the meaning crisis writ large on Job, on Oedipus, forced into contemplation. And that's why this is a wonderful play, in spite of the horror. And so we have life at the limit case, stripped to the barest state. No status, no wealth, no social structure to hide him from the bare fact of his human condition. And so this is the beauty of this play. And of the subsequent play, the sequel, if you want to call it that, Oedipus at Colonus, which we're not going to go into now, but in a nutshell, where Oedipus has been banished, or he banishes himself. He tells the king, "Banish me, get me out of here, because I'm the one polluting the city, even though I'm blind." So he leaves, but luckily his daughters help him, assist him. Antigone and the other one, I think, is Ismene, maybe. Anyway, they leave. They go to Athens, interestingly, and Colonus, which is next to Athens. And Oedipus at Colonus is received by the Athenians with dignity, because receiving Oedipus is a blessing. Here's a man who has suffered so much and suffered with dignity. He didn't lash out against the gods. He didn't lash out at other people. He took it upon himself and kind of just had to contemplate the bareness of his own existence, refusing to take it out on anybody else. And so therefore he's a blessing. So when they receive him into Athens, he's there. They let him die there because he's dying, but that brings a blessing. So Oedipus's life is a blessing. This dignified suffering, this contemplative reflection on the human condition, this philosophizing, this and including the self-sacrifice of leaving his own people, of becoming homeless, is the blessing. So that's this week's episode.